Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. And while you're sitting in the audience, watching them perform their act, you find yourself staring with laser-guided focus, examining their hands and the sleeves of their shirt while watching their eyes as if they were under a microscope, with the sole purpose of trying to debunk and catch them slipping up in order to say, aha, the cards are in the sleeve of their shirt, or the rabbit was already in the hat, just trying to figure out how they're tricking the audience into believing that magicians actually possess some type of magical power. And photo editing is really no different. There's many different tricks photographers use with the intent of creating confusion in the viewer, to have them believe something is different than it actually is. And in this video, I want to share with you 5 tricks that photographers use to fool you and the secret step-by-step process in which they accomplish this. So to jump right into it, this is a great example right here of a sun that just looks a little bit too defined, a little bit too crunchy, because when you look at the sun, it naturally has an atmospheric glow to it. And if you've ever wondered exactly how to create that, this is exactly how. Now, I'm sure there's multiple different ways to do this inside of Lightroom or Photoshop or Capture One, but this is the method that I use to create that kind of sun glow effect inside of Lightroom. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm already in the develop module. I'm gonna come over here to the radial filter. I should say I'm gonna come over here to the filter section and select radial gradient. I'm gonna come over here and draw a huge, I shouldn't say huge, a large radial gradient right over this area here. And I'm gonna put the center of this radial gradient right in the center of the sun, because that's gonna be the brightest part, of course. And I want that to be where the radial gradient begins and then slowly feathers out to all sides. And I wanna make sure that I leave my feather at 0. And I'm gonna always, well, I'm not always going, I should say I almost always, I very often start to increase the temperature first, because you know the sunlight is warm. So I'm gonna come over here and increase the temperature to maybe about right there. I think looks pretty good. Maybe bump the highlights up just a touch. I always like to do negative texture, because whenever you have a lot of bright light around, that usually kind of softens up details a little bit. So I'm gonna bring that texture down a little bit. And then I'm gonna put a lot of negative dehaze in, and you can really see what that's doing here. Maybe to about right there. And then positive clarity, because whenever you use a lot of clarity, that naturally adds luminance to the area that you're applying it. So I am going to, and you can see it when I rock this back and forth, what that's doing. So I'm thinking, I'm gonna put quite a bit of clarity in here, maybe something to about, I think right there looks pretty good. And since I'm gonna create the illusion that there's a lot of, glowing sunlight around that area, and whenever you have a lot of sunlight, that naturally just opens up the shadow area. So I'm gonna bring up the shadows up a little bit as well, to about right, maybe about right there. I'm gonna rock the contrast back and forth a little bit just to see what that's doing. I think a little bit of contrast looks good. And last but not least, I think I'm gonna just bring up the black point just a little bit. I think I'm gonna bring these highlights down just a touch. Let's close this and do the before and after. So this is where we started, and this is where we're at right now. So this is before and after, before and after, in a real quick process. I kind of rushed through it because I want to make sure to respect everyone's time, but I think you get the idea, and the results really do speak for themselves. I mean, this right here looks much more atmospheric. It has that nice glow. It's very soft, right, all through that region, and I think it looks much better than the image did previously. Now, the second trick is something that I use constantly, and I know a lot of photographers do this as well, and it's something that I call side light. And, well, let me just show you. So right here, you can see that the sun is setting in this region right through here, but it's very soft, it's not very exciting, it's very subdued. And I really want to pump that up, because this isn't the most exciting photograph in the world, but if I throw some additional light in there, I think it could possibly save it. So once again, I'm going to come up here to the filters, and I'm going to select radial gradient. I'm going to make the image a little bit smaller to about right there, and I'm going to draw a very large gradient pretty much across the entire image. But this time I'm going to put the center of the gradient right on the edge of my scene, kind of bring it down a little bit closer to the horizon, and I'm going to stretch this all the way across my photograph to about right there. I think that looks like a pretty good starting point. And then once again, I'm going to bring up the warmth quite a bit on this one. Let's bring this back to normal size. And let's see, maybe bring up the highlights a little bit. Let's bring down that dehaze quite a bit to about right there. And maybe even bring up the exposure just a touch to about that area. Bring up those shadows a little bit, because once again, whenever there's a lot of bright light around, that naturally brings out the shadows. So I'm gonna bring that up a little bit as well. Let's do anything with the clarity. I think I'm gonna bring the clarity down in this scenario because I really want to kind of soften up a lot of those details. Something to about there. Let's see, I want to make sure I'm not clipping anything. Nope, nothing is being clipped. I think I'm going to bring the shadows or the highlights down just a little bit to about maybe right there. I think looks pretty good. Let's toggle this on and off just to see. That's before and after, before and after. I think I'm going to bring this down just a little bit more, kind of bring that dehaze back just a little bit to about right there, and maybe even bring up that blacks just a touch as well. And then once again, like now you have all this nice side light just kind of raking across these cliff faces in the background. And let's toggle this on and off. Let me close it down. So this is before and after, before and after, and it completely transformed this overall photograph. It went from kind of a photo, like I really don't know what I'm looking at here. There was nothing really exciting going on anywhere in the scene. But now it has this beautiful side light, very ethereal, diffused light, atmospheric light, just kind of raking across the entire scene and illuminating the cliffs in the background. So that naturally kind of draws the viewer's eye through the photograph. And one more time, this is before and after, before and after. And I think that that right there made a world of difference. This next technique is something that I've been doing for quite a long time. And every time I show it on the channel or mention it to anyone, everyone really enjoys this. And it's very, very simple to do. But on just about every single image that I have that's either a sunrise or a sunset, any type of image that has a golden hour light, I use this type of a technique. And it's something that I simply call golden hour pop. And it's just a way to kind of emphasize that beautiful golden light that's already occurring in your photograph. So in this particular scene right here, this is a sunrise in Acadia National Park. And I'm going to come up here to the develop module. And there's already some nice color happening right through here, but it's just okay. It's nothing too dynamic, but in just a few short steps, we're going to take it from just a little bit of decent color to just an absolutely explosive sunrise. So I'm going to come over here to the color grading section. I'm going to select highlights here. I always like to use this this color right here, and this custom kind of, well, these are the kind of the default color swatches that Lightroom gives you, but I like this one right there. I'm going to close it down, and then we can bring the saturation up quite a bit. I'm going to overdo it so it's easy to see at home. And then this is kind of the brightness value of that area, the luminance. Can kind of bring that up a little bit. And then this is before and after, before and after. And you can really see what it's doing to the entire scene. Now that color goes from the horizon all the way to the top. Now that's definitely overdone quite a bit, so I'm going to bring it back to a more manageable number to about right there. But you can also do the same thing to the shadows too. So I'll come up here, let's select that same color there, maybe bring down the saturation just a little bit on this scenario, and then toggle this section on and off. So this is before and after, before and after, and that completely transformed that golden hour light in the photograph. And it, like I said at the beginning, it went from, you know, a little bit of color to now that color goes from the horizon all the way to the top of the photograph, and it feels like it has a lot more of that kind of eye-catching quality. Now, if you want to take it a step further, this is pretty cool as well. What I'm going to do is, let's start up here. I'm going to create a linear gradient. And I'm going to drag it across the scene just like this, because there's already this nice kind of diffuse side light coming through the Valley of Yosemite, hitting Bridal Veil Falls. But I want to make it a little bit more atmospheric, almost like there was already a little bit of fog in the valley that particular day, and that sunlight coming through is just really adding to this kind of dreamlike state. So what I'm going to do is with this linear gradient, and you can see it at the top right here, I'm going to add a little bit of negative dehaze right through there, and you can see what that's doing to that area. So just a little bit. I don't want to go too overboard. Maybe we'll just soften down the details just a touch to about right there. And now I'm going to close this down, and now I'm going to go back to the color grading section, and now we're going to go ahead and tint those highlights that warmer color. I'm going to come back up here to highlights, select this area here, select that little color in the center, and you can see what that did right there. Before and after, before and after. And if we also want to tint the shadows a little bit to get rid of that kind of blue color right through there, go to shadows, tint that right there, maybe bring down that saturation quite a bit on that area there. Go back to highlights because it looks a little bit overdone to about maybe there. And let's toggle the entire edit on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. totally different. We added that kind of a diffused look to the overall scene where the light was coming through, and then we also warmed up those highlights as well. So that's a fantastic technique. Whenever you have any kind of golden hour light in your image, think about, you know, tinting those highlights a certain color, maybe using the linear gradient or radial gradient, and using some negative dehaze just to kind of add to that atmospheric look. Now, I keep saying this, that this is a technique I use all the time, but this next technique really is a technique that I use constantly. And it's something that I call spring towards fall. And it's not that I'm always trying to make a spring photograph look like a fall photograph, but I personally don't like to have super vibrant greens in an image. I usually like to have them look a little bit more towards yellow. That kind of takes on a little bit more of a fall type of a look, but there's a lot of really cool ways to do that. What I'm gonna do, this is a waterfall in North Carolina, captured on a nice spring day. This image absolutely screams spring and has this very vibrant and punchy greens. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come down to the calibration section, and I'm going to shift this blue primary hue over to the left just a little bit. And then I'm also gonna do the same thing to the green primary hue. And if you watched the video a couple weeks ago all about the calibration section, then you are probably already a pro at this. So this area right here is extremely powerful. So I'm gonna bring this over a little bit as well. I think I'm gonna bring the saturation of the greens down a little bit. Maybe bring the blue primary down a little bit. I should say the saturation of the green primary down a touch. And then now I'm gonna come up here to the HSL color section and come over to hue and take these greens and shift them all the way over more towards yellow. And I'm gonna take the yellows and shift them a little bit more towards orange to about right there. I'm definitely kind of overdoing it a little bit just so it's easier to see at home. But I think about right there looks good. And if we toggle the before and after, this is before and this is after, this is before and this is after. So you can see why I call this spring towards fall, because it's just a great technique to, like I said, not necessarily make spring photographs look like fall photographs, but if you want to just kind of shift the colors of green more towards something else, this is a great way to do that. And I think it actually, I mean, it's definitely a little bit overdone here, but I think you get the general idea. Something to about right there might be where I would normally leave it. And this is before, and this is after, and once again, before and after. So that's definitely a very fun technique to play around with. And the final kind of trick, and this is something that has been pretty common the last few years, especially as the popularity of film has kind of come back again, but there's a lot of different ways to create that kind of filmic look using a digital camera. And there's a lot of fantastic ways to do that through post-processing as well. So basically taking a digital photo and making it look a little bit more like a filmic photo. And this is something that I personally like to do a lot. And I just want to walk you through the quick technique that I go through. So this is an image from California from a couple years ago. Beautiful tree. I'm going to come up here to the basics section, and the very first thing I always like to do is just kind of lift up those blacks just a little bit. And I chose this photograph for this example because there is a lot of dark area right through here. So I'm going to bring the blacks up quite a bit to about right there. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to come down here to the tone curve. I'm going to put an anchor point in the bottom left-hand corner here in the darker midtones, put an anchor point here in the center in the midtones, and then put another anchor point right here towards the brighter midtones. And then one final anchor point right here towards the darker shadows. And I'm just gonna lift this tail in here until this output, usually right around 25 or 30 is where I leave it. So I'm gonna take this output in this scenario to maybe about 25, and then we're gonna take this anchor point here. Actually, I think I'm gonna take this anchor point and leave it at 24, and then bring this one more down towards about 20. And if we zoom into this area here, let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. And let's toggle the full edit on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. And you can already see that we've just kind of moved away from those real deep blacks, because I think that's one of the best qualities about film. So a lot of times there wasn't those really super deep blacks, and images that have those deep blacks to me kind of scream digital. So I always like to kind of soften those blacks just a little bit. Lift this up just a little bit because I want to make sure it's easy to see at home. And then the final step here, that's probably a little bit much. The final step here is to add or come down to the effects section. and I want to add a little bit of grain. So if you never played around with this grain slider here, it's pretty powerful, and it's actually kind of fun to play with once you just kind of experiment with it a little bit. What I like to do is find a dark area, because that's usually where you can see grain the most. And I'm going to take this grain, I'm going to crank it all the way up. And you can see what it's doing right there. Obviously, you don't want to take it to 100, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave it at 100. And then I'm going to take the size, and then I'm going to take that all the way up, and you can see what that's doing. So if you want to make the grain very, very fine, or if you want to make it very large, you can do that. I usually like to have fine grain in my photographs. I'm thinking maybe a record right around 20. And then, but I'm going to leave it at 100 here real quick. And in the roughness, you can take it all the way up to make it really rough, or you can leave it all the way down here to make it a little bit more smooth. So I am going to take the size to right around 20, which is kind of the default that I usually go for. And then we'll leave this kind of grain amount. I'm going to leave it up a little bit so you can easily see it. And then I'm going to take this roughness to maybe right around maybe 40. Looks pretty good. And then let's toggle the entire edit on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. And then zoom all the way out and do it again. Before and after, before and after. And I think that this version right here, I think this looks much, much more like it possibly could have been taken with a film camera versus this right here. Now I know it's a subtle difference, but it's definitely a very, very fun technique to play around with and experiment with. I think that noise slider is probably one of the sliders inside of Lightroom, and I think every post-processing software out there has some version of or some way to add noise to a photograph. But it's not done a whole lot. At least a lot of people that I talk to never use it. So I would encourage you to check it out and play around with it a little bit and see if you enjoy that more kind of a more subdued look or more of a filmic look to your photographs. So those are 5 techniques that I think a lot of photographers use to kind of trick their audience a little bit. I know I love using these techniques in a lot of my photographs as well. And these are also fantastic techniques to use when an image, maybe you made an error in a photograph when you were capturing it, maybe you overexposed the sun, you could use the sun glow to fix that. But these techniques are great to apply to one of your photographs just to kind of add that little bit of a oomph, you know, that an image might be missing. So before I do wrap up this week's video though, I just want to say a real big thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a dynamic and attractive online platform to create your website. You can display your photography using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs and customize the layout and look and feel of your gallery just so you can make it your own. With Squarespace's traffic overview feature, you can track trends in page visits and views to better optimize your content, and you can even grow and engage with your customers with Squarespace's email campaign tools, which will enable you to create engaging emails that match your website with your products or blog post and logo, just so your messaging remains consistent. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So I really do hope you enjoyed this week's video. I hope that you were able to follow along. I'm always trying to go through these videos as fast as I possibly can, trying to throw as much information into a video as quick as possible. So I hope I don't go too quick. I hope you were able to catch all that information. And I hope it's something that you find interesting, and maybe you can apply it to some of your landscape or really any photographs. And I hope you enjoy the way they look or what they might do to possibly enhance some of your images. As always, if you have any questions about anything I went over in this video, please leave those in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to get back in touch with you as quickly as humanly possible. And as always, I really, really do appreciate you watching this week's video. And if you did enjoy it, if you could give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And if you really enjoyed the video that much, if you could share it with your friends, maybe your local photo club or whomever you think might enjoy it as well, I really would appreciate it. Thanks again, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.